Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning, I'm Hilary Fordwich with Key Solutions, and welcome to this week's edition of Government Contracting Weekly. In today's show, I had a chance to sit down with Angela Stiles and Amy O'Sullivan from the law firm of Crowell Moring as we approach their 29th annual Ounce of Prevention seminar. After my interview with Angela and Amy, we're going to show you a second part of an important conversation that I had with Richard Nathan, the President and CEO of Key Solutions. Also, we'll hear from Doug Gates, a partner and the head of KPMG's Global Aerospace and Defense Practice. As always, there's a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Good morning and welcome to a special segment. We're going to give you a heads up today about a Crowell Moring conference that's upcoming, and I'm delighted to have with me Amy O'Sullivan, a partner from Crowell Moring. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
And also Angela Stiles, who's a partner at Crowell Moring and also the head of their government contracts group. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning, Hilary.
We always try to give you some great insights into what's happening in government contracting, and this conference, an Ounce of Prevention conference that's going to be taking place here in DC, upcoming soon, May 15th and 16th, really has some interesting content. I know that cybersecurity was one of the topics and sequestration, but what about some of the other topics you'll be addressing, and what else about the conference should our audience know?
We talk about all topics related to government contracts, so we really try to cover suspension and debarment, small business issues, mergers and acquisitions, updates in the False Claims Act. We even have a special segment dealing with investigations this year.
Really, that's really quite broad. So basically, anybody in our audience is in the government contracting arena, there'd be something for them.
Absolutely.
Yes. And then also, in terms of the mood going into this conference, I know that you'd actually, Angela, been on our predictions for 2013, and you'd been very cautious about a lot of things. And actually, I do want to let our audience know that Angela was right in all of her predictions. So we one day want to replay that. But what's the mood going into this conference are you seeing?
I think some of the fear has subsided. I think the fear of sequestration has passed. People understand how the government's going to act. People are back to their day-to-day interactions with the government. Everyone recognizing that there's less money. It's a little harder to do business, but I think people are all moving forward.
Good. That's healthy to know. Great. So now that we're really in the midst of sequestration, everybody's adapting to it, as Angela just mentioned. But Angela, what do you see from the perspective of your previous role? You were in government, and what do you see that government officials are doing when they look at less to spend? How are they deciding where they will cut and what they will do?
They are actually setting priorities. I mean, you actually are seeing them making decisions about what programs are the most important programs, which ones do we need to fund, how do we need to fund them, how do we allocate the money to get done what we know we have to get done.
So how are they making judgment calls about that? If you were in that role, what sort of things would you look at? I mean, some data points for our audience so they know, like, well, let's take care of this or that.
Well, the problem with sequestration is they can't make a whole lot of calls. So,
yes,
you know, they have some things that they can move around in terms of money. So you want to make sure that the troops are taken care of first. I mean, there's no question that people make sure that the troops are taken care of, that checks go out the door, that the basic services are happening, that you're really not waiting in a line for TSA or other things like that. What I think gets left behind is advanced development. Advanced development of weapons, research, things that
Which
really...
is sad for the future.
It is very sad for the future. I think that's always what gets left behind when you start cutting money, are the more creative programs, the research, the development, the next type of weapon that we'll use, the next type of technology that may be, you know, very progressive that we'll use in the private sector as well.
Yeah, and so sort of like the private side, where on the commercial side people will look at things that are more discretionary. It sounds like it's similar sort of judgment.
That's exactly right. So
Yes.
people will ask questions like, do you really need to send up a new type of space shuttle or something like that? Whereas that's really how you advance technology in our country, is by the funding of some of these research and development programs by the government.
Now, since you've been so right in terms of your predictions, what are you seeing in terms of now that we're reaching the halfway point? What do you predict for sort of going into more the end of the year?
It's going to get a little harder towards the end of the year. So it's going to get a little harder come August and September when the funds really do start to run out. So you will see some things that have to be absolutely just cut off at a certain point in time.
But what about everybody's talking about the fact that there should be an avalanche of procurements because the government still has to spend the entire budget. Will we see such an avalanche in the summertime?
Started.
It's
Absolutely.
started. So in the summer, everybody's saying the summer's going to be totally and utterly flat out. Do you think so?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. And a leveling off. We actually had an interview with Elliot Branch, the head of procurement at Navy, and he was saying that there'd be that avalanche and then there'd be a sort of a leveling off while there's an assessment, and then there might be sort of a sort of catch up at the end of the year. Do you see that same catch up?
I think the catch up might be tough. I think they're going to be running out of funds by the end of the year. Some agencies manage it better than others. So DoD, maybe you will see that at DoD, but some of the civilian agencies that are going to struggle more with how to manage their money, I think they'll be running out. Okay.
And my last question with regard to sequestration is in terms of the new normal, is this going to be a new normal sort of as far as the distant future that we can see, like into 2014, 15?
It is the new normal. There's no question it is the new normal. We have fewer funds to spend, and this seems to be the way that we reduce our spending now.
This is it. Another topic that's going to be addressed at the conference are bid protests, which of course in this era of sequestration and budget cuts, we've heard from many people are increasing. And Amy O'Sullivan is with us again this morning, talking about the conference. And Amy, do you see bid protests? Is that sort of the new normal that they're going to keep increasing and going to be more intense the rest of this year?
Well, we've certainly seen a trend of steady increase in bid protest litigation. Frankly, a huge spike starting in 2008, double-digit increases year over year in the amount of protests filed. Those trends have slowed off some over the past year and a half to 2 years. But again, I think even with the impact of sequestration, that increase in the amount of litigation that we're going to see is going to continue. Contractors are not just going to sit back and watch money going out into the contracting community without sitting there and speaking up and voicing and trying to get in for those particular opportunities. So while we don't anticipate a huge spike, I think, in the activity, I do expect the rise to continue.
Okay, thank you. And what do you see in terms of that rise? Have government contractors' decision-making process changed in this era of austerity, or is it sort of the same as it always was?
The decision-making process on the agency side, frankly, is from a schedule standpoint, it's almost become protests as a new normal as well. So in the procurement cycle, it's almost become inevitable that you have to build in the period of time to deal with the disputes process before a contractor can actually step in the door and start working. So whereas many years ago, there were some contractors who actually like to convey the impression that they don't protest, that it was simply not part of their mindset. And
it was looked somewhat down upon, really, wasn't it, if you were from the process? Yes, and it's lost that negative image.
It has, and now, I mean, it's an expectation, and now there's not a sort of a fear of a bad impression simply by utilizing a process that's available to simply ensure that there's fair competition.
The stigma's gone, unless there's really no reason for the protest.
Right.
But generally there is a reason for the protest. So if there is, the stigma of actually filing is gone.
So you don't think there are frivolous bid protests?
There are some frivolous bid protests.
In general.
And frankly, there's going to be situations where companies file these types of litigation just to file. You see that more where you have an incumbent contractor who utilizes the process to hold on to the work that they have. Through the protest process, you actually have the ability to put the brakes on a new contractor stepping in.
Paid, so right? Yeah, that's a strategy in of itself.
I'm going to keep my
money. I'm going to make money while we do this. Yeah,
I get another 100 days at least.
Yeah. So. And also for the law firm community, it's good because actually there's a number of people who are benefiting this. They probably look at it positively.
So, but it's a cost-benefit analysis for some companies. If they can buy 3 more months of work, it certainly would outweigh the cost of litigation.
Yes,
but many still do think hard about suing their customer. I will say that many still think very hard.
Because of the relationship they've established,
That's
yes.
Right.
I actually just came out of a course this morning teaching contractors about the process, and really in advance before that decision to file is made, it's a very fast-paced determination, and companies actually have to sit down and truly make a business decision. You're suing your customer.
Yes.
And so it is not something that companies can take lightly.
Okay. Of Of course, in this era of austerity, a lot of government contractors are hurting, and a lot of small businesses have really suffered. So given that you're going to be covering some specialties in terms of small business at your Outsource Prevention conference, what do you see that small businesses are facing? Are they going to be gobbled up? Are they suffering exponentially so, Amy?
Well, frankly, they just have less capacity to withstand austerity measures. And frankly, the imposition of more of a complex regulatory scheme. A lot of these smaller companies are already dealing with a maze of complex government regulations. And in order to compete in the government space, there's an overlay of unique small business regulations that are very difficult to navigate. Where they end up having probably the most difficulty is actually when they are working with large business contractors. And frankly, for small business set-aside procurements, these are not necessarily small value contracts. They can be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Some small businesses, frankly, can't do the work without the assistance of a large business acting, for example, as a subcontractor, yet there are very difficult restrictions to comply with in terms of how that relationship can work, what assistance and what levels of assistance those companies can actually use from a large business teaming partner.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies have to, on that note, because of the volume of regulations, add many FTEs just to cope with that actual work, and then of course they're lowering their margins for any contracts.
It is, and there have been actually one of the particularly difficult changes coming down in the next year that we're still trying to figure out how they're actually going to work in practice, addresses specifically limitations on subcontracting. And so this actually comes into the calculations of, okay, if it's awarded on a small business set-aside basis, a small business has to be in the driver's seat as a prime contractor. How much work are they permitted by law to allow a large business subcontractor to perform? And so there have been a lot of difficulties in the prior version of regulations in terms of how you even calculate that. The new regulations impose even a different test and more than one test as far as how you make that determination.
So they need internal prep just to get ready for those kind of tests.
It's an ever-moving target. And companies actually have been looking more and more to the Mentor Protege program.
And how has that been affected? Is that still substantial and beneficial for small contractors?
It's been extremely beneficial both to large and small businesses. Small businesses benefit because they get the assistance of the large business as a true mentor. Large businesses benefit because they actually can get in the door on set-aside procurements.
Small set-asides, yes.
And actually can do it on a joint venture basis, where we're going to see the major expansion of this program in the coming year. Prior to this year, it was limited to 8A contractors through the SBA program. The changes coming down the pike are going to be an expansion of that program outside of the 8A program to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, to women-owned small businesses.
Minority businesses.
So it is going to be a broader pool of potential companies that these large businesses can work with in this program.
That's actually a positive note.
Absolutely. Although I think the large businesses have to carry a significant burden here. There's a lot of risk to the large businesses who are acting as subcontractors. There's a lot of investigations. There's a lot of inspector generals. Congress is concerned about it. So it's a high-risk area where the large businesses, I think, are going to have to know these regulations well and carry the ball, even though they're acting as a subcontractor or acting in one of these mentor-protege relationships.
Okay. We're talking about the Outsource Prevention Conference that Crowell Moring is hosting here in DC coming up on May 15th through 16th. And one of the issues that's sort of percolating is the fact that there'll be a lot more M&A activity this year. That a lot of small companies may not make it if they lose a contract, or they could be somewhat tending to be out of business, and so they're ripe for an acquisition. And Amy, I'd love to turn it to you and ask, is that what you're seeing, and what do you project through to the end of this year at least?
Well, one of the benefits of this conference is we're able to tap into the resources that we have here at the firm, where we actually have a long-standing history of our government contracts attorneys working close by with our corporate attorneys, particularly in dealing with M&A and due diligence work in the government contract space. Coming into this conference, when there's sequestration issues out there, there's a lot of nervousness. Companies determining what and when to shed portions of the business, when's the right time, how best to do it. So there is going to be some of that shedding of layers coming up in the short term, and consolidation within the industry. Other opportunities and sort of ways to see the movement in the market is going to be looking overseas. If you know, there's less money here in the U.S. in the government contract space, where are there opportunities? And also looking to joint ventures, both overseas and frankly here in the U.S., because it's going to give companies that added benefit of having expanded capabilities and experience at a prime contractor level.
Mm-hmm. Angela, any thoughts on top of that for M&A this year? You're so good at predictions.
Well, I think people need to be cautious in the M&A arena, really. You need to know what you're buying. You really have to do your due diligence and understand the company and the liabilities that may come along with that particular company, because these are entities that are working under very strict regulatory regimes here in the U.S. with government contract laws, and abroad, dealing with Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and UK Bribery Act, and you really have to know what you're buying.
So in terms of due diligence, could you have some other tips? And so what are some of the things that you look at when you're helping a firm that they may never have even considered before? Some of those.
Well, frankly, it does really require in this space somebody coming in and doing the due diligence who has the government contracts expertise. There are, you know, a maze of regulatory requirements, frankly, that don't end up arising until you have somebody coming in after the fact when a company is trying to clean house, getting ready for a potential acquisition. But this is something that absolutely, even if there's a lull in business at the moment, this is precisely the time that companies should be coming in internally, reviewing what they have, ensuring that they're up to speed on compliance issues so that you don't have the issues come and pop up after the fact. And companies, frankly, in the context of a deal, may be looking at more stringent reps and warranties, buyers less willing to accept open-ended items, and greater concern, frankly, for future audits and investigations, and that having an impact on the purchase price.
And if you're selling, I think it's really important to wrap it up nicely in a bow, have a good compliance program, make sure you understand what your contracts require.
You're more appealing to any potential purchaser.
Absolutely. If you've got a strong ethics and compliance program and they feel like you've got a good handle on your contracts and your contract requirements, it'll make all the difference in the world in due diligence.
Well, given that there are vast cash reserves out there, I think it's purported that a lot of the large primes are going to go on a buying spree, and it sounds like you're saying that that could really happen this year.
And private equity too. Yes. They're holding a lot of cash as well, and they've been buying up a lot of these companies.
And they know a lot of companies are vulnerable because they just can't survive when they lose a major contract.
So they believe they're getting a deal, but they're still going to be pretty cautious, I think.
Yes. Well, just want to make sure that you do remember the conference that's coming up soon. And actually, Amy, if you could tell our audience, if they'd like to register, it is open to the public. Anybody can attend this conference. Any government contractors that would like to get a lot more information, there's going to be a lot more there. May 15th and 16th. Amy, what should they do? Is that on your website, the Crowell Moring website?
There is detail about the conference available through the Crowell Moring website. It's known affectionately as our OOPS conference.
OOPS, an ounce
which
of prevention.
Stands for Ounce of Prevention. And after 29 years, we put together a fantastic
That's exactly our age.
Yes, exactly our age. So
it's been going on since before I was born.
Right, yes, oh, I should have said that one, yes. So Amy, thank you so much for coming. Angela, thank you for coming, and make sure you look at that Crowell Moring OOPS conference. Angela Stiles and Amy O'Sullivan are rightfully excited and proud to once again be part of the Crowell Moring Ounce of Prevention seminar, which is free and open to the public. Now let's look at my conversation with Key Solutions' Richard Nathan, followed by KPMG's Doug Gates. Richard will talk about the new contract win, while Doug Gates offers advice to incumbents. They say that size is everything, not necessarily in government contracting. Tell us about the sort of David and Goliath stories you have, Richard, because I know you say that size isn't everything.
Well, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and there were a few proposals that stand out as being extremely satisfying. And two in particular are David and Goliath type story.
Like
yes,
for you.
yes, rewarding. And let me tell you about one of them. We actually won. And we were David, and there was a big Goliath out there, and nobody thought we had a chance, but we won. We worked for a large Midwestern university. They were competing for a large science project that was associated with an even larger construction, let me call it a physics machine, that had to be built at the winner's facility. And the only competitor was a national laboratory. Now, for those of the people who don't know, the national laboratories are funded primarily by the federal government.
So they had a major in right there.
They had a major in right there. They knew the client better.
The relationships, everything, yeah.
Precisely. But more than that, if you think about it from a business perspective, the federal government has to fund this laboratory. Now, they could use these earmarked funds, and by earmarked, I mean earmarked for that project, or if they gave those funds to someone else, they'd have to come up with a similar or a like amount to give to the national lab.
So you were the David, and you had biases concretely, financially against them.
That's exactly right. So we were the spoiler. And because of the nature of the university, it was stuck away in the Midwest. It was not on anybody's top 5 science schools list. It's not one that you would normally think of for this kind of a mega project. But nevertheless, when we got in there, we realized that they were perfect for the job. They had an extraordinary faculty in this area. They had an extraordinary infrastructure. And they had an extraordinary solution to the problem that nobody else could match. But we had to tell a story, and we had to overcome the institutional bias against them.
Right.
So what we did is we started early. We did hopefully everything right, but we
Which
did
is
enough
preferable.
right.
You always want to start as early as possible.
Always
yeah.
want to start early. But we had to get away from just telling the science story and start talking about things that were important to the evaluators that might have otherwise undermined us. So we were looking for our weaknesses. Then we came up with mitigations for every one of those weaknesses.
And that's one of your other points. I know you always say that you love it when people will not just come in with their preconceived notions. You were able to help them look at that and be honest with their own weaknesses.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we made them deal with issues such as everyone knows universities can't manage large projects, right? Well, we came up with this, we actually made a joke out of it and proved why that did not apply in this case. We also, the public generally knew that the people in that state, in that city, in that state, would not want this job, this project, because it was disruptive. Well, we showed that there was local commitment to this project. And the students actually rallied in favor of this project.
So you looked at the elephants in the living room and negated them.
Every one
yes.
of them. Every one
Very
of them.
clever.
Safety was another issue. It's a big engineered project, high energy physics, going to go right through campus. So the antis were talking about, I mean, the other team was talking about safety on campus. Well, we dealt with it. We dealt with it strongly. So we found all the, as you put it, we found all the elephants in the room and we dealt with them.
One by one, knocked them off, yes.
Exactly. And once we got rid of those, then the evaluators could focus on the science and engineering. And we won on all of those merits, and it was extremely satisfying. But one thing I want to say about this unnamed university is that every client I've ever worked for talks about corporate commitment. And the president of the corporation or the group or division or whatever signs a letter saying how committed they are to the project and how important it is. And we draw org charts showing it, reporting to the top to make the point with the government how important it is. But in this case, the commitment was really there. We talked earlier about frustrations I sometimes have. I've been on proposal teams where you ask for simple things in order to make the proposal better, and you don't get it.
They can't deliver.
They can't deliver on it. Oh, spending $3 here and $5 there, that's too much. We can't do that. But this university, from the president and the board of directors on down, made everything happen. And they made it happen without arguing, without finding a way to say no, and they did it quickly. If we needed for the site tour a little building built about the size of a 2-car garage over here in order to make our point about the physical layout,
it would
we asked for it a Friday, and Monday it was there.
That's phenomenal.
The commitment was incredible. In fact, we had a 2-day site visit. After the proposals went in, there was a site visit, there was 25 hours of orals. But on the site visit, the president actually the president of the university led the entire site visit and could actually, she had a degree in one of the social sciences, but she could actually answer the physics questions.
That's
It was
amazing.
incredible.
Yes.
And we won. And we were blown away because we didn't really expect to win. We wanted to, we thought we were deserving, but we really didn't expect to, and we won. And that one will go down in my history, my personal history, as the most satisfying thing I've ever worked on.
And Key Solutions was there helping David to win.
Yes, we did. We were there.
Great. Good morning. I have with me this morning Doug Gates, the lead partner in charge of KPMG's Global Aerospace and Defense practice. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Hillary.
Thank you for coming in. There are so many firms that tend to suffer for incumbentitis. Once they're the incumbent, they get comfortable there, and they may not be quite as competitive. It's more competitive ever nowadays, and so what I'd love to ask you, Doug, for our audience is, what are you doing to advise those incumbents so that they can retain their current position?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. In fact, I really say a couple of years ago, the government kind of threw down the gauntlet. Ash Carter, in his position in leading acquisition, challenged them around the affordability initiatives and made it clear that the government is willing to recompete.
Pretty much everywhere, and anything.
Everywhere and
yes.
anything.
Threw down the gauntlet, yeah.
And so it really requires that the primes and the incumbents to be kind of a razor's edge around affordability on their products. Looking for the best value for their price as they go for these recompetes. And in such, we've seen a lot of activities. We've seen large OEMs form affordability groups, create partnerships in the Beltway with the government, and really ensure that they have strong relationships, both inside the Beltway with the prime, with the Pentagon, but also with the key programs. A big part of it, keeping a program sold, is having those relationships, having that trust that you know more, you have that inside track. That, along with keeping that really sharp eye on cost and affordability, is absolutely critical.
So demonstrate why you should remain the incumbent.
Absolutely, and they've always historically had the advantage to do so. And there's been goods and bads on programs that have changed hands, and I think that they have to, be very, very vigilant in this time. The government is looking for reasons to transfer or even to cancel programs, and I really believe that the large contractors understand that and are staying very, very focused around that.
Great. Thank you, Doug. I'm sure you'll all agree that the expert advice offered by both Richard Nathan and Doug Gates is more relevant than ever. I hope you also will consider attending the Crowell Moring seminar on May 15th and 16th at the Renaissance DC Hotel, where they will cover a wide range of topics, including cybersecurity, sequestration, bid protests, small businesses, M&A, and many more topics. Most importantly, thank you for watching Government Contracting Weekly, and all of us at Key Solutions look forward to seeing you again next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.